Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this talk in the DiveRSE series. This is the first talk of the series in 2023. We had 4 talks last year, and I'm really pleased that we're able to continue the series this year. And our speaker today is Dave Horsfall from the Newcastle University Research Software team. Dave is a senior research software engineer and also a fellow of the Software Sustainability Institute. And as part of his SSI fellowship, he's been doing some fantastic work looking at mental health within the research software community.
So thanks so much, Jeremy, for inviting us down to Imperial. Very happy to be here. I'm going to be talking about mental health today. And I'm just going to kick off and say that the session is going to be quite interactive. So I'll be asking some questions through Mentimeter. So you can go to menti.com and then enter the code that's shown here. So 1600049. So the talk is entitled The Importance of Talking About Mental Health, specifically in the research software engineering community. I'm not sure if people have seen my talks before. I see a lot of familiar faces in the Zoom room. I've done a lot of sessions over the last 2 years trying to kind of advocate for better mental health in our community. This talk is kind of somewhat a reflection on the observations that I've learned and the experiences that I've had, where I'm sharing some of the results, and I'm also discussing some of the results of the survey that I ran last year, some very early results as well. So I wanted to start with a little bit of a trigger warning. So the content of this session may cover emotionally challenging topics associated with mental illness. As I say, throughout this session, I'm going to be inviting people to share their experiences. It's a very complex topic and people might be very open, which I would welcome. It's a safe space for people to be able to share things that they want. And so it's obviously very difficult to anticipate what might come up. And I also want to kind of make a statement as well that I'm not personally a professional mental health kind of trainer. I don't have a lot of training in this area. I've been motivated to try and advocate in this space and facilitate conversation and empower people to share experiences, which I think is really important, so that people kind of feel more community in this space. They can share from and learn from each other's experiences and understand that lots of other people in this community might not be talking about it, but are having the same experiences. So I kind of want to say that if I say anything that is wrong or doesn't kind of align with the experiences that you have, I'd be really interested in learning why you feel that way. So you can reach out to me privately, or you can also kind of share as well in the Slido along the way. And I'll definitely take that as reflection for any future conversations that I have. So just to make sure that we're on the Slido and people can kind of interact with us. I have not asked this question before, but I was interested to know where people are joining us from today. I kind of anticipate lots of people from the UK. I did think just having a map of the UK would be interesting. It might just be the UK, but we'll see whether there's any kind of people joining us from elsewhere as well. And apologies to those people joining us from Antarctica, you're excluded from this, this map. Okay, great. Lots of people in the Zoom room. That's fantastic. And we're not all based in the UK. And then the next question that I wanted to ask was, how is everyone feeling today? So in one word, can you describe your current mood? So it's difficult to keep up with these word clouds as they move, but we have okay, tired, energized, warm, happy, sluggish, exhausted, tired, sunny, stressed, inertia, content, fine, enthusiastic. So this is a a big variety of how people are currently feeling today. And this is obviously exactly what we expect, a huge broad spread of kind of moods that people are coming into this session with. So I'm going to start with talking about one or a few definitions of mental health as just to kind of frame the rest of the conversation. I quite like this slide. So mental health is an indicator of how we're able to cope with the stresses of daily life. It's super important for us to talk about, and it's something that everyone has. It's intrinsically linked to our physical health. It's definitely worth taking time to discuss. It can be positive or negative. It's not a sign of weakness. It isn't an interchangeable term with mental illness. It's not something to be ashamed of. And it's something, it isn't something that we decide to have or something that's always negative. A good model for mental health is a continuum, which we're constantly moving up and down. We can feel that we are feeling positive and functioning healthily. But if our mental health slips down and we're really struggling, then this can have a real impact on our everyday functioning. And it's worth noting that, again, mental health isn't an interchangeable term with mental illness. If someone's previously had very poor mental health, and they can reach out, they might get a diagnosis and receive treatment, and then be able to live healthy, positive lives, functioning well at the top end of this continuum. So why am I speaking about this and advocating in the RSE community? Well, there's a few stats from kind of adjacent communities. A third of respondents sought help for anxiety or depression related to their studies from Nature's 2019 PhD survey. And 22% of respondents reported having some type of mental health issue. And this is from Stack Overflow's 2022 developer survey with over 7,000 respondents. So these adjacent communities show kind of the stats here show us the prevalence of mental health issues within those communities. And over the last 18 months, 2 years, I've done a lot of talks within the RSE community, and I've done a survey, and we can talk about stats from that a little bit later. But I've got lots of feedback which I would like to share. It's kind of a meandering discussion points as we go through, but I'd like to talk about what the community has said about mental health over the last 2 years. How does our mental health affect our work? How can we get help, and what are our rights in the workplace in the UK? I'd also like to talk about living with a mental illness and the stigma and shame associated with that. And then also the role of mental health for a diverse, inclusive workplace. So these are the kind of broad discussion points that I'll be trying to work through today. I have spoken more than a dozen times to audiences in the UK and internationally as well. And I wanted to share this slide, which is from a plenary session last year at the RSE conference in Newcastle. So towards the end of the session that I give, I ask who has experienced one of these mental health conditions, and people can choose from depression, anxiety, burnout. They can indicate they've had experience with another condition, or of course they can indicate they have no experience with any of these. They can only select one option, so I always ask people to choose the option that's had the biggest impact on their lives. And from 190 respondents during the session, 162 people, which is 85%, indicated that they assessed themselves as having some kind of experience of a mental health condition, which is kind of incredibly high, right? It's when I started these sessions, I would always get results similar to this, and it did initially shock me. So these are kind of similar screenshots from other sessions that I've run, and it's actually common that people that in some of the sessions, everyone who responds indicates they've had experience of some of these mental health conditions. I also ask what factors contribute to poor mental health in your role as an RSE. There's definitely common threads that come out of this, and I wanted to share a few of the initial pages. So I have hundreds of these, and I'm just going to kind of talk through a couple of pages, which I think are indicative of the kind of common themes that come up. So this is what RSE said at the RSE conference as factors that contribute to poor mental health. So we have overwork, short-term contracts, workload, lack of time, discrimination, agency, self-doubt, torn in too many directions, and job security, funding, stress, too many projects, decision-making, lack of job stability, Tories, which was a political one at the time, and workload, isolation, lack of feedback, context switching, too much to do, context switching, unclear projects, context switching, none, senior management, stress, loneliness, overwork, fixed term contracts, feeling that I've achieved something or not, working alone, self-doubt, perceived knowledge gaps, two babies and different projects at once, physical health. And I think I've got one more, no job security, taken for granted, lack of socialization, funding, overwork, too many projects, hours, job security, and small teams. So the reason I wanted to read through those is that the kind of themes that come up are very, very common, and they always come up again. And I've kind of split the session, it split all of the responses into kind of common themes. And one that always comes up is this idea of self-doubt or uncertainty in people's own ability to do the job, which I kind of clumped together with imposter syndrome, which is something that I've talked about a lot as well. So I've definitely suffered from imposter syndrome a lot. I definitely did at university quite severely, and it has taken me quite a long time to develop strategies to deal with this. So imposter syndrome is kind of loosely defined as the idea that we've only achieved due to luck and not because of our talent or qualifications. And it can, particularly in the development world where there's always new frameworks to learn, we can often dwell on the kind of knowledge that we don't know. In the research environment where we're supporting researchers that might have studied their domain for a long time, it's very common for us to have these feelings. So I wanted to ask who also has experienced imposter syndrome during their time working as an RSE. So I've not asked this question before during a session, and I kind of was expecting something quite similar to this. So the vast majority of people have experienced. I had communication with someone, a friend put me in touch with them, quite a young woman who has previously worked in research, who was really interested in the RSE role because she liked the development aspect of her role and had applied for a job as an RSE, but was filled with self-doubt because she felt like she was going to go into this environment where everyone would be completely competent at software engineering and everyone would be able to do tests and like automation, and she just wouldn't have a clue what she was talking about. And I hear that story very commonly, and also from the other side. So people coming into this from industry, feeling like they might have good software engineering skills, but are going to be totally overwhelmed by the research element and not be able to cope. And my experience of coming into this community is that if you come in with a good attitude, there is lots of chances to acquire the kind of software engineering skills that are required, and that you're not going to face this complete wall of competency as well. Everyone's on the spectrum, everyone's coming in with different experiences. So I particularly like this slide when thinking about imposter syndrome. It really helped me, and it helps me still kind of reframing the approach to dealing with imposter syndrome. So it's easy to think that what we know is just a small subset of what everyone else knows. But in truth, we all have complementary skills. It's the whole reason that we actually work in teams. We're all always bringing something unique to any project. Another common theme that comes up a lot is loneliness. I think that the loneliness aspect is super important as we come out of the COVID pandemic. So I came into the RSE role right at the start of the pandemic, just as the first lockdown began. So I really struggled to make connections with my colleagues, and I was working from home. My personal situation is that I have a wife and 2 kids at home, so I can't say that I felt lonely during the COVID pandemic. I had other issues to deal with, but of course the COVID pandemic had worked really well for some people. It worked really bad for others, and we all have kind of different experiences to kind of discuss. But loneliness and feeling connected with colleagues even after the pandemic has finished is something that we're still kind of dealing with. Financial pressures come up a lot. The nature of the research environment is that we have short-term contracts. There's a lot of job uncertainty. Even if you feel relatively secure and you feel like you're going to be able to secure future funding, knowing that you have an end to your contract can be really stressful. And in the world that we're currently living in, where cost of living is going up and interest rates are going up, this can cause a lot of kind of underlying stress and anxiety. Apologies. Not having much luck with that today. So I also wanted to include this slide, which the aim here is to kind of indicate that the motivation for talking about this is primarily thinking about mental health at work. But of course, mental health is a super complex topic, and people have don't just arrive at work and have stresses at work that affect their performance at work. People often have factors at home or outside work that have very severe impact on their mental health and behavior, and it's not something that they can just leave at the door. So it might be caring responsibilities, there might be all sorts of different things that people are going to bring into the work environment, and it's super important for teams and particularly for managers to kind of be aware that there's factors outside work and to be sensitive to those when there's a particular change in someone's behavior as well. And then this slide was kind of meant to encompass a broad range of things, like I've simply got too many projects, I've been given too much work, I'm really stressed about funding, all of these things in the research environment that we have simply no control of. And those things are really important to kind of acknowledge as well. There are lots of things that we don't have control of within the work environment that might cause us stress. And so I wanted to do a little mental health check-in with everyone here. So there's 3 statements that people can kind of indicate whether they strongly disagree or strongly agree with. And so those statements are: I'm happy at work, I feel on top of my workload, and I feel connected with my colleagues. So again, the pattern here is, I have asked this a few other times, and the pattern here is fairly consistent when I ask it. So when asked whether we're happy at work, we tend to have this average that is quite high, and that a lot of people are feeling quite positive about this. But then whether people feel on top of their workload, it's a much broader spread. And we can really see that here, where a lot of people are feeling very overwhelmed. And then connected with colleagues, again, tends to be on the positive end, but there's a much broader spread. So I'd be really interested for people connected on Zoom, if they want to offer an interpretation of this themselves on Slido, we can kind of stop or we can pick that up at the end and we can talk through those as well. And if anyone wants to kind of unmute themselves and talk through this at the end. One thing that's super important to acknowledge on this slide is that we have two people joining us who are very, very unhappy at work, 5 people that don't feel on top of their workload at all, and 3 people that are feeling completely disconnected from their colleagues. And it's possible that they are the same people as well, selecting those. So I just really want to acknowledge that we hear that feedback from you. And inevitably in these talks, there's a lot of focus on what factors cause us bad mental health, and I kind of asked those questions. So rather than always focusing on negative things, I felt it would be a nice thing to kind of ask what things actually make people feel really good at work. So what strategies do you have to take care of yourself? And so we can hear what other people respond to this. So I was expecting these answers to come up as people were typing them. I'm not sure whether selecting the answers will stop people's ability to submit, so I'll just give it a few seconds and then we can talk through those. This is amazing. Okay, I'm going to press enter now and see what we have. Great. So this is not a question that I've asked before, so I'm super interested to kind of read through these and reflect on them as well afterwards. So my colleagues, chatting with colleagues, positive feedback, water cooler chat, socialization and being heard, completing things, admitting to colleagues that I'm overloaded, music, so definitely one for me as well, learning from colleagues, having agency, collaborative working, office banter. Sorry. The place and vibes, I feel like I've achieved something great in my life, finishing a task. I like the research environment, positive feedback, audio of true crime, lunch with colleagues, being made to feel appreciated, acknowledgement of my contributions, co-working, collaborating with colleagues, collaborative working, camaraderie, colleagues asking questions about life outside work, cake, that's always important. When I feel like I know what I'm doing and I'm able to teach others those skills. Sense of community, working together effectively, feeling part of a team. I love software development, the sun, actually delivering something tangible, pizza Mondays, the feeling of producing something useful, writing quality software, better line managers, positive team, inclusivity, clarity, organization, succeeding with a team, completing projects, achieving, connecting with people as a team, checking things off my to-do list, helping a colleague, having good relationships, nice environments, mentoring young researchers, being able to being in control of one's projects, solving difficult problems. Colleagues encourage me to be generous with my estimates of how long things will take and allow time for things to go wrong. Enjoying social time with colleagues and being productive, seeing my software being used, solving problems as a team, nice project boards, getting in a flow state, music again, someone asking me for help, routine of sharing positive and negative things every week with the team, that's nice, counseling, positive feedback, exercise, proactive career development, colleagues are grateful when I fix their bugs. I'm sure they are. Constructive feedback. I'm really happy that I asked that question. That's really nice. So we can focus on the things that make us feel really bad and try and solve those problems. But I think it's really nice to take a time to kind of reflect on what's positive. And maybe as a community, we can also develop these kind of positive mental health toolkits as well, where we can proactively kind of take care of ourselves, or this idea of self-care. And there's a few nice things here. So being kind to yourself and others, I think, is super important. This idea of self-compassion. It's easy to kind of berate ourselves for silly mistakes that we make. I do that all the time, and I speak to myself in ways that I would never dream of doing to a colleague, and it's really not helpful. Developing and using positive coping strategies, using flexible and accurate thinking skills, building self-awareness, noticing good things in life and taking the time for that. So yeah, this is something that I'd be interested in developing within the community as well. So I'm just looking at the time. I've got a few more slides. If you are feeling overwhelmed, you might want to seek help. And if you're worrying more than usual, finding it hard to enjoy your life, having thoughts and feelings that are difficult to cope with that affect your behavior, or you're just simply interested to find out more about support or treatment, these are all good indicators that it might be worth reaching out and seeking help. If you do want help, you can speak to your doctor. They're there to support your mental health as well as your physical health. You can also speak to a trained therapist. Family and friends are great for getting help if they're available to you, and they can it can be great to talk to someone that you know and trust, and they can also help you by coming with you to appointments. And there's lots of charities and talking services and there kind of community support services available for free in the UK. And of course, we have workplace or student support services as well that are available to us through our employee assistance programs. So I just want to talk through some preliminary results from the mental health survey that I ran last year. I'm working towards publishing a report on this, but these results are based on the survey with 152 qualified responses. So from the survey, when I asked, since joining the RSE community, have you experienced a mental health condition? 34% responded yes, which is consistent with the Nature's PhD survey. And of those, of the 34% that responded yes, 52% of those people have already received a diagnosis of a mental health disorder or illness. This, I think, is a super interesting point, and it's actually a lot higher than I expected within the community as well. So again, I'd be really interested to hear thoughts about this and interpretations on the Slido. I asked since working in the RSE community, which of the following has caused you significant stress or anxiety at work? And I was genuinely shocked by this. The top result for this was socializing with colleagues. So over 35% of people responded that socializing with colleagues causes them significant stress or anxiety. And I've been reflecting on this and trying to interpret this result. I would like to kind of delve a little bit deeper into this. I know I can't do that at the moment, but is it because people do want to socialize but don't feel equipped to do so, and that's the source of the stress? Or is it that people simply are very happy to have professional relationships at work but really have no particular interest in socializing with colleagues? When trying to create a positive culture in the team at Newcastle, I'm very proactive about trying to encourage people to socialize and get to know each other. But, you know, I maybe have to rethink the approach of doing that. I'm not entirely sure. Again, I'd just be interested to hear anyone's thoughts on that. But in terms of top results here, we have high stress levels, technology changing quicker than you can keep up with, projects that conflict with values, long hours, the daily commute, and discrimination, where discrimination is still being selected by over 20% of the people of the entire survey that responded. As I said, would be interested to hear feedback in Slido on any of these, but particularly on the discrimination. If anyone feels able to do so, to share experiences that they have with discrimination in any particular way. And we can discuss those at the end. I also asked, since working in the RSE community, which of the following negative feelings have troubled you at work? So nearly 50% have indicated that they don't, that they have previously felt that they're not up to the job. So again, there's this prevalence of imposter syndrome within the community. We also have lack of control over workload, feeling you don't fit in, considering leaving the current job, and considering leaving the profession as well. I'm very, very early in my analysis of this data. I don't have a huge lot of experience kind of analyzing survey data. And as we all are, very difficult to find bandwidth. I would be very interested if anyone would like to help with the analysis of this data. I do want to write a report, and I would be interested in publishing this somewhere as well. So I'm very happy to co-author the report and any subsequent submission with anyone who's interested. So please do get in touch if you would like to help. So moving on, in my talks, I often have sections where I talk through very common mental health challenges. Two of the most common are anxiety and depression, and I give a kind of brief text description. But I do think it's much more important to hear from people directly about how these conditions impact their lives. So I wanted to play this short video this time, and hopefully the people on Zoom can hear this when it plays. Please just post in the chat if you can't, and we can try and sort that out. It's about 3.5 minutes long, and I'll just let it play through.
When I'm depressed, it's trying to do anything feels like trying to start a car when there's no gas in the car. You can like really want to go somewhere, you can really want to like do the thing, but you literally don't have the means. You know, it can feel as heavy as a boulder or as light to carry around as my fingernail, but it's as much a part of me as that fingernail is.
Depression to me feels like a giant weight, kind of like one of those big dumbbells. It starts like right in your gut, and you just feel it slowly intensifying. So it starts out small, and then all of a sudden it gets a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger. It goes down to your stomach, it goes up to your heart, it kind of spreads throughout your entire body, and it just gets like slowly heavier and heavier and just a little bit harder to deal with and a little bit harder to carry, and then it gets really overwhelming.
Having anxiety feels like a million bubbles filled with things that could go wrong that are just pushing on me. And each bubble is filled with something that could go wrong. And all of the things that could go wrong are irrational to a normal person, but to someone with anxiety, the thing that could go wrong feels like the worst thing in the world.
It kind of feels like rolling in a ball down a hill. You do start to feel like a little bit like a roly-poly, and you just kind of collapse in on yourself. And like one little kind of thing that you get fixated on, and then it just kind of starts to kind of spin and spin and spin around you until you kind of feel like you can't control all the things that are worrying you anymore.
I have obsessive compulsive disorder, And to me, that's always felt like having a separate sort of cloud of a mind outside of my own mind, a sort of buzzing gray hive of thoughts that sort of come in and out of my own brain and can be sort of busy or less busy depending on how I'm feeling on the day.
OCD is like a faucet dripping over and over and over again. And you keep having all these irrational thoughts, and you know they're irrational, but you just keep having them, and they are so important to you at that moment, and it's all led by fear.
ADD feels kind of like being this like high-functioning robot, but if you like went into the mind of the robot and actually learned what the robot is thinking, it's just like a bunch of Katy Perry songs and like old childhood memories.
It has this huge importance to you.
This is the thing that actually impacts many, many, many people, but people don't actually do anything about it because we are trained to think that it's not a problem or it's something that we can control, when sometimes it actually isn't.
There's a lot of beauty that can come out of it. There are strengths to it for sure, and I think a lot of creative people especially have figured out ways to connect ideas and use it in a creative sort of way.
So the video should have had captions on by default. Apologies for anyone who couldn't kind of engage with that video. I think it's great to kind of hear directly for a quite broad range of mental health disorders, kind of practically what the experience is and how it impacts their behavior. So off the back of that, I wanted to ask whether people feel comfortable sharing mental health difficulties, would be comfortable sharing a mental health difficulty with their colleagues. So this is a slight variation on a question that I commonly ask, which is whether people feel comfortable sharing a mental health problem with their manager or supervisor. And it's interesting, actually, that I think there's a greater reluctancy to share mental health difficulties with their colleagues in the team. So I just have one more slide after this. When I initially started advocating for mental health in the community, I was perhaps a little naive about this. It's as I learn more and as I talk more, it's a super complex subject. I'm really trying to define what it is that I want to achieve out of this, which is still an ongoing process. But I think that really it's important to advocate and empower people to be able to share their experiences and talk freely. I did want to ask if you would like to share something about your own experiences with good or bad mental health or living with a particular disorder, feel free to do so on this slide. And then we'll wrap up and we'll take a look at Slido. I'm not sure whether there's much activity in Slido. So, okay. So I think people can still submit responses after I've hit enter. So CBT helped me a lot as a treatment. Good mental health, I feel energized, which is great to hear. Bad mental health led to binge eating disorder. Sometimes it is like waking up with a weight on my head and shoulders that slowly folds me in half throughout the day. Bad mental health, depression, I feel so tired. Used to get panic attacks, gave up caffeine, it worked wonders. I also am super sensitive to caffeine and did also have to cut out most of the caffeine that I used to drink, which was way too much. That's really fantastic. And I'll make sure that I share these slides with Jeremy afterwards, and they can be distributed so people can look through these in more detail. But I'm really glad that people have felt empowered to share those experiences and thoughts. There's a mailing list which you can join if you're interested in keeping up to date with the advocacy work that I'm doing and any developments. And thanks very much for listening.